All right, high rollers. Our guest today, the South African phenom, the dawn of sports betting, Chris De Beer. Chris, welcome back, mate. It's been a while.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on. You brought me back on at a time when I don't know if we've ever had so much mixed martial arts news to talk about.
It's absolutely nuts, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned it there. Lots to talk about in the UFC. First off, I want to talk Michael Bisping. I mean, this guy has been in the UFC a long, long time. He finally gets his shot at the title. Heavy underdog, and he pulls off an incredible upset of Luke Rockhold. And now, I mean, he absolutely seems to be relishing the fact that he is the world champ.
Yeah, Michael Bisping, what a story. I don't know if there's anyone more deserving of winning a UFC title than Michael Bisping. He came in through the Ultimate Fighter and he had to fight his way in from England. The first real fighter from Europe to put UFC on the map there. Kind of the guy who's always just missed his shots. He's lost number one contender fights. Takes this fight on 2 weeks' notice, knocks off the champ in the first round, and we've got our first British UFC champion. What a great story.
He's a definite UK legend when it comes to mixed martial arts. Now, of course, Chris Weidman, I mean, this guy absolutely makes me laugh. He comes out on Twitter saying that, you know, it would be the biggest fight, him and Bisping. He's trying to get his shot at the title. But wait a minute. Bisping says, hey, slow down, buddy. Get in line. You've got to win a fight before you can face me. I'm the champ. So what do you think's going to happen with Rockhold and Weidman? Are they going to do it?
You know what's even funnier, going back to Weidman, was 2 weeks ago he was saying that Bisping was a joke. He didn't even deserve to be in the title picture. Now he's done a complete 180 and saying this is the biggest fight they can make. So we see the game of mixed martial arts, and the UFC fighters are very fickle with their opinions. But going back to Weidman and Rockhold, I think that would be a great fight to make for a number one contender fight. There's so many options in the middleweight division right now. We could have Bisping versus Rockhold versus Weidman. Even Dan Henderson's name is getting thrown in there. We could have him against a number of opponents, really, so it's very exciting.
Well, I think that Dan Henderson has to be the leading contender right now because, A, Michael Bisping wants that fight. I mean, the logo for Henderson is him knocking out Bisping. Remember that vicious knockout? That was incredible.
At UFC 100, who can forget that? Bisping already out cold and Dan Henderson just flying and punching him one more time.
And if Bisping wants revenge on that fight, that would be a fan favorite, wouldn't it? I mean, Hendo's coming off a big win of his own, that incredible back fist elbow of Hector Lombard.
You know, guys keep asking me, does this guy ever age? Dan Henderson, in his 40s now, still knocking out guys in the UFC. This guy's been fighting forever. He's been in the Olympics for wrestling. He's done it all, and he just continues to impress. I don't think anyone could have predicted Dan Henderson in 2016 would be knocking guys out with head kicks and elbows to the head, so it's crazy.
Well done, Michael Bisping. I mean, he's been around a long time. He's a true fighter. What makes sense for him? I think it's Henderson, but a lot of people are talking about GSP coming out of the woodwork, and that's a fight that I don't like. I mean, I'm a GSP fan, but let's face it, his whole career, he dodged Anderson Silva at 185, saying he's too heavy, and now all of a sudden he wants to fight Michael Bisping because perhaps Bisping's a bit older?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. Obviously, every time we have a new champion or someone's creating buzz, GSP's name gets thrown in there. Whether we'll actually see him back in the octagon again is another story. But I quite like the idea of Bisping versus GSP. It'll do good buy rates. It'll be fun to watch. But at the end of the day, I prefer to see Bisping take on someone who's pretty relevant in the middleweight division rather than someone who's coming back.
I think you got to give Bisping that revenge fight with Henderson. Let him be champ. Give him a chance at retaining the title one time. In the meantime, put Rockhold against Weidman. They were supposed to fight anyway, and the winner of that fight gets a shot at the title. Also at UFC 199, Cruz beats Faber. The trash talking ends. The trilogy is over. Cruz wins it. And he's the champ. I mean, this guy is a beautiful fighter, isn't he?
Dominic Cruz really is incredible. If you look at him in the octagon, there's no wasted movements. He moves flawlessly between his groundwork, his takedowns, his striking. It's just, he's a pure mixed martial artist, and he makes it look so easy. And another incredible thing is his knowledge of the game. He'll talk to you 2 minutes after his fight, and he'll be able to analyze every single thing he did right and wrong, down to his footwork. It's absolutely unbelievable, the mind that this guy has for mixed martial arts.
And he's got a great mental game, as you just mentioned, because leading up to the fight, he just stays calm. Faber's going off. He stays calm and then points out the truth about his camp and about his situation and about the fact he can't win.
Even after the fight, he was getting under Faber's skin. Faber was getting all hot and bothered, and Cruz just cool as a cucumber. pretty much insulting Faber and how he runs his business, how he runs his fight camp, him as a fighter, and he does it all he doesn't even break a smile. It's awesome.
Now, he's a great champion. He's one of the pound-for-pound best in the world. Going forward, what's up for Dominic Cruz? Could it be this newcomer, Cody Garbrandt, who absolutely destroyed the undefeated Almeida with a vicious knockout in the first round? He's tatted up, right up his neck. He looks scary. In fact, he is scary, and Faber says he's the next champ. Is he stealing a page from the Conor playbook, and could it get him a title shot with Cruz?
You know, it's an interesting situation, but I think Cody is still a bit young. He's untested. We've got to remember that fight with Almeida was his first main event. It was his first kind of test. So maybe one or two more, and then he could get that title shot, but you never know. Everyone knows in the UFC, if you can talk your way into a fight, if you can bring those fans in, you've got a good chance of getting that fight that you want.
Well, if that was a test, he definitely passed it with flying colors. I mean, that was just spectacular. Okay, fight night this weekend. We've got two pretty nice fights on the schedule. The main event, Rory McDonald against the Wonder Boy, Stephen Thompson. What do you make there? Who have you got? Who do you like there?
You know, that's a very interesting fight, and it's kind of like they've got two different personalities in the way they approach things. I'm a big Rory McDonald fan, so I'm hoping he's going to be able to get the job done. And I would love to see Rory McDonald someday get that title. He's always kind of been GSP's shadow. He was always kind of the second guy. But hopefully he gets that title one day, so I'm hoping for him to get the victory there.
Well, he's got home field advantage. The fight's in Ottawa. Of course, the Canadian contingent will be on hand cheering him on. I think, personally, this is a very dangerous fight for the Wonder Boy. He's coming off the Hendricks spectacular KO, but you know, Hendricks is a different fighter. He mauls ahead, mauls forward. He's going to punch until he drops, whereas McDonald is way more technical and perhaps more skilled.
And McDonald is a very smart fighter, so if he does find himself getting in trouble, he's not going to carry on swinging for the fences or do something dumb. He's going to work a way to get out of those difficult situations. So it's a very interesting fight to look at.
It's a big fight, too, for Rory McDonald because I think it's the last fight on his contract. He's been threatening to go to Bellator. He's got a kid now. It's about money for him. And I think that last fight with Robbie Lawler really woke him up to the fact that, hey, I'm putting my life on the line here. I need to be paid. So he needs to win this fight to set himself up for a big payday in his next match.
Yeah, that's the risk he takes. If he wins this fight, he can negotiate a good deal with the UFC. Obviously, if he loses this fight, he's got the Bellator option, but he likely won't get as good a contract with the UFC. That's the hand he's decided to play. He's backing himself, so let's hope it works for him.
Yeah, and let's hope he gets some extra money at the end of the night. Both of them, in fact. Let's hope it is the fight of the night. Also, Donald Cerrone versus Patrick the Predator Cote. Cote, a Canadian. He's been around the block. Cerrone, a fan favorite. I think this is a dangerous fight for Donald. I mean, Patrick Cote can slug with the best of them.
Yeah, Patrick Cote, that's very hard. He's dangerous on the feet. And people forget Cote's been around. Cote, I remember watching him fight Tito Ortiz. He's fought the best of them. He fought Anderson Silva one time. So Cote, he's got the experience. He can cause the upset on his night. But I do expect Donald Cerrone to get the job done.
All right, UFC 200. I mean, the card is absolutely stacked, top to bottom. Really coming together lately with the breaking news of Brock Lesnar fighting Mark Hunt. I mean, how good is that?
You know, it's unbelievable. This UFC 200 card, it was a great card. It had 3 title fights, but it was missing that little something. If we were going back to last year, we were saying it was going to be Ronda Rousey versus Holly Holm, the rematch. We were saying it was going to be Conor McGregor versus GSP or Robbie Lawler. People were just going crazy with all these big names. Obviously, Ronda and Conor, the two biggest in the sport. 3 weeks ago, neither Conor nor Ronda were on the fight card. We did have the 3 title fights, but they didn't have that much excitement. You bring in the name of Brock Lesnar, and suddenly this card is getting mainstream press everywhere, from ESPN to sports stations in Britain to Europe, all around the world. Brock Lesnar brings those type of ratings.
Check out some of these fights that are real early on this card. Hendricks versus Gastelum. Dillashaw versus Asunciao. You got Sanchez versus Lozon. Miller versus Gomi. And these fights are early. Now, getting late, Aldo and Edgar. What are you making with this fight?
You know, this is quite an interesting fight, but it's a bit of a sleeper, if you will. People aren't really paying too much attention to it. It is an interim title fight. Obviously, Conor McGregor is the champion in that division. But these are two guys that historically have not drawn well. Jose Aldo got to be the worst drawing champion in history. No one cares about that guy's fights besides maybe a couple people in Brazil. The fact that he pulls out of his fights so often doesn't help. And then Frankie Edgar, I like him a lot, but he just doesn't seem to garner that mainstream publicity, that attention. So this is basically between two guys who struggled to garner attention and garner press. And they've basically been in the news recently because the winner of this fight is going to face Conor McGregor. That's really what people are watching this fight for.
I know you like to wait until the weigh-ins to make your bets. Have these new rules where they can weigh in at 10 o'clock in the morning, like in California, they're going to do that in Ottawa as well. Does that affect your bet making because of the weigh-in so early the day before?
Absolutely. You see lots of fighters in the past have looked like absolute death on the scales. The one that always comes to mind was Conor McGregor at UFC 189. Looked like an absolute skeleton. So if these guys can get down to weight earlier, they've then got that much more time to recuperate, to recover, and I think it's a lot safer, and we're going to be seeing some better fights. We're not going to be seeing guys going into the octagon dehydrated and underperforming.
Okay, so I know you like to wait until the weigh-ins to make your bets, but do you have a sense of who's going to take that Aldo-Edgar fight?
You know, I actually like Frankie Edgar in this fight. Jose Aldo, I think his time might be past. He seems to be more active on Twitter these days than anything else, and all he seems to talk about is Conor McGregor, Conor McGregor, Conor McGregor. So that's definitely on his mind, and I think Frankie Edgar is going to be able to use his wrestling and his boxing to win this fight.
All right, Velasquez versus Brown, the heavyweights going toe-to-toe. What do you make of this one?
This is absolutely a great fight. Two of the top guys in the heavyweight division. Cain Velasquez has always been that guy who's had so much potential. Everyone is saying he's going to take the UFC into Mexico. He's going to take them to the stratosphere. But he hasn't really ever become that super champion that they wanted. He's had great fights, but he's always hasn't been able to put 3 or 4 together. So this is an interesting fight, and I do think Cain Velasquez will come out victorious.
All right, now I'm really looking forward to watching Kat Zingano back in the ring. I mean, I think she's a vicious fighter, and I think she got very unlucky in the Ronda match. Do you think she's got a title run in her?
You know, in that UFC women's bantamweight division, without Ronda Rousey in the picture, it's quite a shallow division. So Kat Zingano wins this fight and Ronda Rousey's not coming back, then I can't see any reason why she doesn't get the next title shot.
Okay, now we got Tate and Nunes. Misha Tate coming off that choke out of Holly Holm. That was a big, big win for her, capping off a long and dedicated career. What do you make of this fight? Nunes looked very slow and looked like she gasped in her last fight.
You know, this is a great fight, but I don't think it's the fight that anyone really wanted. People either wanted the Misha Tate versus Holly Holm rematch, or they wanted Misha versus Ronda. So this is kind of the third pick for lots of people. And if we're being honest with ourselves, that women's bantamweight division is built on the back of Ronda Rousey. And unfortunately, with Ronda Rousey not really playing a part in this fight or the storytelling of this fight, it isn't as big as it could be, and that's unfortunate for these two very talented women.
All right, then the co-main event, we've talked about it briefly, Lesnar, Hunt. Let's look at how they match up. Lesnar's got a 5-inch height advantage. They both weigh in at 265. Of course, Hunt's got power in both hands. Lesnar doesn't seem to like to get hit, but he's just so massive. Do you have a sense of who's going to win this one?
You know, this is a great fight, and I actually can't believe that Brock Lesnar took this fight. Brock Lesnar could have come back. He could have told Dana White, I want to fight at UFC 200, and I want to fight an absolute tomato can from some gym in Milwaukee. He's fighting Mark Hunt. As you said, in the past, historically, Brock Lesnar hasn't enjoyed being hit. He's turtled up and moved straight back against Carwin, against Velasquez, and against Overeem. So to put him in there against arguably the biggest hitter in the UFC is just an unbelievable decision to me, and props to Brock Lesnar for coming out of retirement to take this fight. The odds makers opened it up with Brock Lesnar as the favorite, then Mark Hunt became the favorite, and I think that's where the line should be. I think Mark Hunt should be the favorite, but if Brock Lesnar can get that takedown and get on top of Mark Hunt, then I think that's fight over. So if Mark Hunt hits the first big shot or Brock Lesnar gets the first big takedown, that's going to determine who wins this fight.
I mean, it's a classic matchup. That's what it comes down to, right? If Brock gets a takedown, the fight's over because no one can get up from being underneath Brock Lesnar. The guy's just huge. And of course, if Hunt connects on Lesnar, we're going to see a big man fall.
Yeah, we can see another one of those walkaway knockouts that Mark Hunt is so famous for. So it's a very intriguing fight. It's the old story of the wrestler versus the striker. Let's see who comes out on top this time.
I gotta admire Brock Lesnar, as you mentioned there as well. You know, these interviews he's done leading up to it. He just said he had some unfinished business. He's a competitor. It doesn't matter who they put in front of him. He just wants to test himself, and he's not one of these guys that sits around and talks about it. He goes out and tries to do it.
Yeah, Brock Lesnar really is a man's man at the end of the day. He's gone out and pretty much done whatever he wants, whether it's the NFL, professional wrestling, UFC. I mean, who would have thought in 2016 that we'd have a professional wrestler still under contract to the World Wrestling Entertainment fighting on a UFC card? For years, both Vince McMahon and Dana White have said it's never going to happen that way. And Brock Lesnar has proven if you have enough leverage, anything is possible in the fight game.
So you see, folks, it is a stacked card. We forgot to mention that Sage Northcutt is also fighting. We got Brunson versus Mousasi. I mean, it's just going to be an incredible night of mixed martial arts. And it all leads up to the main event, and all the trash talking is finally going to be put to rest. Daniel Cormier versus John Jones. I'll tell you what, if Cormier was in there last time against Jones, he might have won. This time, I think he's in trouble.
Yeah, the John Jones we saw in this last fight, you could see that there was some ring rust, as they call it. He wasn't the same John Jones. He was slightly slower, but at the same time, he was still able to win the fight pretty easily. He never looked in trouble. We're comparing him against the John Jones we know, and that's why we were saying, this is not a great performance. But at the end of the day, he got the job done, and I do expect him to get the job done at UFC 200. It's quite interesting that Jones won the first fight, and he's coming in as the challenger against Daniel Cormier. Lots of interesting dynamics at play, and I assume the fight week build-up is going to be more crazy trash talk, and it should lead up to a fun fight.
The fact of the matter is that these two just don't like each other. They're just kind of opposites, aren't they?
At the end of the day, Daniel Cormier, he tries to play the good guy, the nice guy, the friendly guy, and John Jones is the opposite. He's kind of the bad guy. He's had his troubles with the law, unfortunately, and the fans seem to love him more for it, and that drives Daniel Cormier crazy. So it's just the good old story of good versus bad. It's been done for years, and this is happening on the grand stage at UFC 200.
It's going to be a great night. I take it that you've got Jones in that fight?
Yes, I've got John Jones to win, and I think he's going to win via decision.
All right, so decision. Okay, so you've looked at the card. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Which of those fights ends up being the fight of the night?
Fight of the night. Ooh, that's quite a tough one. I'm going to go with Brock Lesnar versus Mark Hunt. I don't think I've ever watched a boring Brock Lesnar fight. And add in the attraction of it, I think people are going to be going crazy. I think the UFC matchmakers, the presidents, the owners will all be going crazy, and the fans are going to be going crazy. So I'm going to go with Brock Lesnar versus Mark Hunt. It might only be a round, but I think it's going to be fun.
Are there any fights either this weekend on the Wonder Boy McDonald card or at UFC 200 that you know you'll be betting?
Not at the moment. UFC 200 lines are looking. There's a few that I'm looking at. In terms of this weekend, I'll be looking at the weigh-ins once again, and then I'll let you know closer to the time.
All right, and of course, people always talking about Conor McGregor. A lot of people questioning his decision to fight Nate Diaz again, but it's been booked. August 20th, Saturday night, UFC 202, Diaz versus McGregor in the rematch. You really got to appreciate McGregor's heart, because this is the fight he wants. He wants to avenge that loss, and he really believes he can do it, right?
Yeah, as Dana White said, McGregor's been obsessed with this Diaz rematch, and it's kind of easy to understand why. It's obviously his first loss in the UFC. It was a fight he was supposed to win fairly easily, and Nate Diaz pretty much embarrassed him in that second round. And obviously, from a business standpoint, it makes lots of sense for the UFC. They're heading into a real boom period right now. They've got UFC 200, UFC 202 with Conor and Nate, and then they've got that big New York City card at UFC 205. So it's a good time to be a UFC fan.
Absolutely. And we talked last time about Conor McGregor versus Nate 1. I asked you then, if he loses this fight, does it ruin the luster of Conor McGregor, of Mystic Mac? And you said absolutely not. And you were bang on with that, because he's still the main guy. He's the guy that everybody talks about. He's the guy that everybody wants to see. And I'll tell you what, if he beats Nate Diaz in this second match, it's going to be unbelievable.
It's going to be absolutely massive. And you know, with Conor McGregor, no matter the outcome, no matter the result, he's so good with his words. He's so good with his trash talk. He can generate interest in basically any opponent, and he can make stars out of anyone, as he says. So this match is huge for Conor. But even if he loses, he's got a world title fight waiting him in either Jose Aldo or Frankie Edgar. If he wins it, who knows what happens? Maybe he fights for the lightweight belt. Maybe he wants to go up to stay at welterweight. You know, you never know with Conor McGregor. And I think the UFC will indulge him as long as he continues to win and bring in the big pay-per-view numbers.
Enjoy the fights, mate. Chris DeBeer, the Dawn of UFC sports betting. Thank you so much for your time, buddy.
Thanks for having me on the show again.